Hello, and welcome to the critical move of Telesur. For the first time in history, the United States is invading itself. This is the headline of media referring to the deployment of federal agents in several cities, mainly those governed by the Democratic Party, in the context of demonstrations against police violence and systemic racism that have shaken the American nation since last May. What does the Trump administration intend with this controversial initiative of alleged national security? What are the current reactions? How is this movement of pieces seen in electoral code? Let's deploy the board. We're making the first move. Oregon attorneys advocated last Wednesday for a restraining order against federal agents. The lawsuit is part of a growing backlash against President Donald Trump, who sends uniformed personnel to that and other cities, allegedly to fight crime, in the context of anti-racist protests. According to experts, the move deepens the already considerable political divide in the country. For example, Democratic mayors in 15 cities condemned the use of the agents in a letter to Attorney General William Barr. I'm also announcing that the Department of Justice will provide more than $61 million in grants to hire hundreds of new police officers in cities that are the focus of Operation Legend. We will never stop subsidizing the police. We will hire more excellent police officers. We will make the law stronger, not weaker. What the cities are doing is absolutely crazy. Many of the politicians who want to cut resources to the police have also declared their cities to be sanctuaries for illegal foreigners. My vision of U.S. cities could not be more different from the anarchy driven by the radical left, while others want to disband, defame, and abolish the police. I support and honor our great police. That's why Operation Legend is all about. That's why we're here to answer the prayers of those who cry out for justice and cry out for help, for those people in Chicago and other cities where we'll know that help is on its way. The president has made it clear it's going to happen in cities controlled by Democratic leaders. The police force, the federal police, are used for political purposes. It's not an acceptable solution anywhere in the United States. We are on the front lines here in Portland. If we can't get the federal administration to back off and leave our city, it will happen all over the United States, which will be jeopardizing the Constitution of the United States. One federal agent's hand was impaled by his ingrown nails. Another federal agent was shot with a pellet gun, leaving a deep wound in his bone. And tragically, 3 federal agents will likely be permanently blinded by the rioters, who aim laser directly into their eyes. These are not the actions of allegedly peaceful protesters. The Trump administration will not stand by and allow anarchy in our streets. Law and order will prevail. I've been very clear. It doesn't happen in Chicago. We don't need federal troops. We don't need unnamed secret federal agents roaming down the streets of Chicago. It is not democracy that we saw on the streets of Portland as a result of this federal action. That's what we call tyranny and dictatorship, and we're not going to have it in Chicago. We don't want federal strangers occupying our city and terrorizing our communities. If we don't keep up the pressure, nothing will change. Nothing will change. This has been going on only for decades, but for hundreds of years also. It's time to stop it. It's time to become the country we always bragged about being. We can no longer brag about anything. We're not the first to do anything. It's a terrible, terrible thing to see at the end of my life. I don't like what's happening here. What Trump is doing is a threat to democracy, so I want to add my voice. I don't want to go near the little green man. I don't want to support what they're doing. I believe that time and resources can be better spent in addressing the pandemic that affects us all in the world, but this is but a deviation from reality, and it is unfortunate. Violence generates more violence. It's just a chain that will continue repeatedly. It's not going to stop. It's not smart. It's not conscious, it's not respectful, and I don't think it will end up being a good thing or something that can easily be solved. Let's map out the territorial distribution of this controversial military operation ordered by President Donald Trump.
Estados Unidos.
United States, Operation Legend on the field. Operation Legend began on July 8, after the U.S. Department of Justice sent at least 200 federal agents to Kansas City with the alleged goal of supporting local authorities in fighting crime. On July 22, President Donald Trump announced that the operation would expand to other cities, specifically those governed by what he called liberal Democrats. Among them is Portland. Although the president omitted to mention this city, the demonstrations against police brutality have been going on for more than 50 days, a fact that has caused a tense situation and the deployment of agents to supposedly protect federal monuments. However, Democratic Mayor Ted Wheeler has announced that the violence has only increased. Chicago is added to the list. According to Attorney General William Barr, approximately 200 agents would be sent to that location and about 35 more to Albuquerque. Another of the cities mentioned was New York, but the mayor, Bill de Blasio, warned that he would go to court if the government sent federal agents to the city. In the Philadelphia case, District Attorney Larry Krasner said his office will charge federal agents with criminal offenses if they assault or illegally arrest someone on the city, while Mayor Jim Kenney said he has not yet received formal notification of the dispatch of uniformed personnel, but would use all available resources to stop this abuse of power. The cities of Baltimore, Detroit, and Oakland are also under threat from Trump to be subjected to his authoritarian plan. Let's find out about this police operation decreed by President Donald Trump. Operation Legend, as Trump called it, is a large-scale police enforcement plan that would send agents from different federal agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI), the Sheriff's Service, the Drug Enforcement Administration (DEA), and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives (ATF). To support the operation, the president relied on precise examples such as the death of the 4-year-old boy, Legend Taliaferro, hence the name of the operation, who lost his life while sleeping in his house in Kansas City because of a bullet lost during a street shooting. Also brought up a massacre at the Chicago funeral home and the murder of a mother in Albuquerque, victim of another shooting on her way to the gym. The plan, which began in Kansas City with the deployment of at least 100 federal agents, is scheduled, or at least those are Trump's plans, to begin implementation in others such as Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Albuquerque, Baltimore, Detroit, and Oakland, in order to increase resources in those locations which, according to the White House chief, are experiencing a disturbing and unacceptable level of violent crimes. We will use federal law enforcement to vigorously prosecute federal crimes and support to the fullest extent possible these besieged communities. Those were Trump's words. The Democratic mayors of 15 cities condemned the use of the agents in a letter to U.S. Attorney General William Barr, who happened to accompany the Oval Office chief to the arrangement where the operation was announced. Two other West Coast senators, along with the Maryland senator, have filed a measure with the Senate requiring that any intervention by federal agencies be explained in detail and limited to their powers unless local authorities ask for their help. However, Trump played another card. He has promised a special fund of $61 million to pay for the hiring of hundreds of local and state police, in his own words, in exchange for mayors allowing support from the feds and the implementation of the Operation Legend on their streets. According to analysts, the imminence of the November presidential election has exacerbated an old thorn in the New York Tican side, the Democratic majority at the helm of major U.S. cities. For this reason, he has decided to transform an issue like crime into a national debate. I invite you to check some digital information. Let's check Hispanic TV Agency on July 27. Protests against Trump result in one death and 45 arrests. In addition to a person who was shot dead Saturday night during a Black Lives Matter march in Austin, Texas, U.S. police also arrested at least 45 people in one day at the demonstrations. Police have made 45 arrests in connection with the riots in the Eastern District. A total of 21 officers were injured after being beaten with bricks, stones, and other materials, Seattle police said Sunday on its Twitter account. This new night of riots was lived intensely, especially in Seattle, Washington State, and Portland, Oregon, fueled by the decision of the Trump administration to reinforce the presence of federal agents in some cities of the country. The New York Times, in addition to aggravating the situation by calling the protesters thugs and threatening to shoot them in the marches not to stop, has ordered federal forces to be sent to every state and city in the country governed by the liberal Democrats, who are protesting against racism and police violence. According to several analysts, the anti-racism protests in the U.S. are worrying Trump because they are deepening and are due to very structural problems in the country. UN News, the United Nations digital site, last July 24, titled, Human Rights Bureau denounces disproportionate use of force in U.S. protests. The peaceful demonstrations that have taken place in the U.S. cities such as Portland must be able to continue without those who participate in them and also those who report on them. Journalists being at risk of being arbitrarily arrested or detained, subject to unnecessary, disproportionate, or discriminatory use of force, or suffering other violations of their rights, said Elizabeth Throssell, spokesperson of the UN Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Regarding reports of unidentified police officers arresting protesters, he said, "This is a concern because it can place detainees outside the protection of the law and can lead to arbitrary arrests and other human rights violations." Throssell said federal and local security forces must be clearly identified, and they should use force only when necessary and in accordance with international standards. In addition, it is important that any victim of unnecessary or excessive use of force has a right to compensation, and there should be, as we say, prompt, independent, impartial, and transparent investigations into any allegations of human rights violations, which should ensure that those responsible are held accountable. I'd like to suggest to you the reading of an article titled Donald Trump's Pinocheted in Portland, written by Francisque Perron, New York correspondent of the La Vanguardia newspaper, on July 26. Journalist Charles Pierce, author of 4 books, including Idiot America, is credited with a new verb invented from a cruel dictator. A few days ago, Esquire magazine published an article on the deployment in Portland of federal agents, also described by various analysts as government paramilitaries or goon squad. According to Pierce, a big city in America is being Pinocheted in broad daylight. That's the comparison between Pinochet's Chile and Trump's country, Pinocheted. The meaning of that display is that the federal executive is using authoritarian techniques to deliberately provoke its citizens, says Timothy Snyder, professor of history at Yale University and author of About Tyranny, 20 Lessons to Learn from the 20th Century. In Portland, laws are being broken when protesters are attacked with pepper spray or arrested by unidentified agents. Snyder said the federal authorities don't seem to think they have to respect the laws, and everything is based on a conspiracy theory that the president, the acting head of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, and the Attorney General, William Barr, are repeating about the plot by the left or the anarchists. They have no basis for actions. There are things that are disturbing. Tear gassing peaceful protesters, including the mayor of Portland, and putting people in vehicles without badges and without reading them their rights is a step toward authoritarianism. Trump seems to admire authoritarian leaders, says Professor Larry Sabato, director of the University of Virginia's Policy Center. It is a departure from past practice and a denial of constitutional rights. Trump has exploited many of the norms and traditions of our democratic systems. He thinks he has power he doesn't have and is arbitrary in exercising it or reckless. Is it any wonder that so many are worried that if he loses the election, he may not leave office? The Department of Homeland Security was created after the 9/11 attacks in 2001, and its mission was to warn the U.S. against foreign threats. Trump, on the other hand, has used this department to enforce his order to protect federal buildings and monuments at a time when anti-racist protests had turned down symbols representing slavery and oppression. We have a section titled On the Hunt for Suburban Housewives. They call it the Suburban Horror Show. Donald Trump's campaign spreads images of violence in cities across the country, sometimes with so much zeal that it leads them to error. One such ad with the text "Public Safety from Chaos and Violence" showed images of a pro-democracy protest in Ukraine in 2014. This dark publicity captures what is happening in Trump's country, not that of rival Joe Biden, and seeks to alert suburban residents, especially women, key in 2016 and now far from Trump, that if they vote for the Democrat, U.S. will be held. If not already, right? Let's take our first break in a critical move. Remember, there is a strategic move in social media for you. What is Donald Trump seeking with the deployment of federal agents, especially in Democratic-ruled cities, amidst protests against systemic racism and police brutality? Is fighting violence his real goal? Leave your opinion. Let's take a short break, and we'll be back soon. Claims of justice for George Floyd, killed by a white cop, were the trigger for a new wave of anti-racism protests in the U.S. And in this context arises the controversial Operation Legend. Let's review. On May 25, the violent arrest in which George Floyd was killed by a white policeman while choking him with his knee, despite the fact that on several occasions the detainee expressed that he could not breathe. After the spread of the tragic event, protests began in the city of the incident, Minneapolis. The social repudiation spread through different states, mainly in Washington, D.C. and New York, and had as common denominator police violence, arbitrary arrests, militarization of the streets, and detention of thousands of protesters. For several weeks, the claims of U.S. citizens, and specifically African Americans, brought to light the actions of a racist state that systematically violates the rights of this community, and does so with total impunity. Amidst the wave of social protests, President Donald Trump took a stand that criminalized the protesters, ignored the protesters' claims for racial justice while barricading himself behind the walls of the White House. But the grief of the African American community did not end with Floyd's death. More African Americans have been killed by law enforcement officers. There are cases of Rayshard Brooks shot in the Atlantic Ocean for resisting arrest while intoxicated. Also, Breonna Taylor, an African American nurse, found dead in her apartment in Louisville City, in the center of the nation. The demonstrations against this death and the evident history of police violence against the black population gave rise in 2013 to the Black Lives Matter movement, which shook the United States during the government of Barack Obama, and which since last May has returned to the streets to demand justice for the African descendant community. We start the analysis in our critical move. We have both of them from the United States, James Early, board member of the Institute of Political Studies of Washington, D.C., and Dennis Shaw, professor of International Studies. Welcome both of you, and thank you for accepting to participate with us today. I'll start with James. What is the true objective of this controversial Operation Legend? Well, it's more than one, actually. This is a way of Donald Trump and his supporters from the Senate of the United States and right-wing citizens to avoid the fact of the police and those constant abuses. And the same thing between Latin American communities and of course to anyone who wants to enter to the United States, escaping from wars and conflicts, and especially in Central America. So the objective of Donald Trump and his supporters and the ones who support this is try to avoid the fact that he couldn't face the pandemic by will, so he has focused on the priority of open up the economy, which indicates that they are ready to risk the lives of the more vulnerable people, especially African descendants, and in this case women who are in the front line supporting the basic functioning of the country. And also it's a reflection of a conflict of ideological political, because Trump is losing. According to the surveys, it looks like Trump is going to get out of the White House. So this is a tactic, this is a way of moving on. It's a policy of law and order, but what he's trying to do is avoid the abuse of power. So this process is about going deeper and deeper into conflicts in the country. In the case of Trump, he's looking for the support of some of the members of the Senate. They're also afraid to lose their positions because many of Trump's voters are not going to vote in the next election. In the next elections that we are expecting to be held on November 3rd. In the opposition side, there are many of Democratic Party that are trying to establish control of the dynamic. In accordance to the Black Lives, and on the streets they are going on and they are claiming, but also specific policies are going on related to structural issues of the system. So this situation, trying to face the pandemic, the lack of facing the abuse of the police and the bad functioning of the global economical system of capitalism. It, it's something that revolves around Donald Trump, and he sees that his political life is in danger, and also uh, of other people in the Senate of the United States. So this is the context where this situation is developing. Well, within a few more minutes, we will continue to go more deeper into that issue. But I'd like to ask Dennis Show about something that emerged in the context of this controversial Operation Legend and on the denounce of UN itself and the High Commissioner for Human Rights, saying that these troops are committing violations to human rights. And it's very interesting that this is happening in the United States, where its administration is constantly chatting about that in other countries people violate all the human rights, allegedly Venezuela, Cuba, China. However, we see that UN itself says that within the United States, the policy ordered by Donald Trump is committing violations against human rights. It's not the first time the American people, and especially the black people, goes in front of the UN to denounce these violations of their human rights. We know that we need to organize to defend our lives. This has become a civil war. Trump wants to show the faces press, such as the New York Post or Fox News. He wants to present it as the salvation of the country, to save lives. But what he's truly doing is repressing that squad and the Department of State back in the 80s. So we are living a high tense moment and very much divisions. Yesterday, a young boy was murdered. His only crime was and in Colorado, other attacked some protesters. So we are seeing more and more violence and brutality. Not only those soldiers that occupied our cities, but also paramilitary forces, citizens themselves, conservative citizens that support Trump. And they are getting ready to face a civil war. So everywhere they go, any manifestation, any protest, we're in danger that some fascist fanatic come along and may affect and may injure danger. And when we see the Fox News, the most popular here in the United States, they believe they're doing that to defend homeland, to defend the American flag. They have their brain very washed. Thank you so much. Stay with us for a couple more minutes. So we are still on another analyzing this idea about the electoral process. We were saying that this has a very clear objective and electoral goal, but we wonder ourselves how such an action like this one, that it's visible, it's affecting American cities, American societies more properly. So how this could turn into a more favorable way for the President of the United States himself. Well, Donald Trump and his allies are provoking. In the case of Portland, the city of Portland, the possibility of providing more interventions with these paramilitaries. And there is a possibility, and it is a public speech among the more moderate Republicans and the Democratic Party, given the possibility that if Donald Trump loses the election, he's not going out, he's not retiring from the White House. Last week, Joe Biden, the Democratic Party candidate, he spoke about that if he is not leaving the White House, he will go with American soldiers to take him outside the White House, to remove him from the outside. So there is this very serious speech, and all this issue, all this situation that is on debate between both parties about the possibility of Donald Trump be improving with this intervention with mercenaries and military, because some people say that he is using private members, using them to participate in the official name of the White House. So this is the situation that is getting worse, and the possibility of Donald Trump to answer to a military state, and how, such as the other person that is participating with us today, just as he said, he presented a report about the problem, about the situation of racism here in the United States. The problem is that Latin American and immigrants, they have to request to the people who represent them to make a cry, to make a stand. Why? Because the movement of Black Lives Matter, when this all started all around the world, when they started to demand for justice here, it generated also racial situations in their own countries. So the report that was presented was about moving citizens to calling on them to condemn the situation. Thank you, James. It is important. The position of the Democratic Party, it's not a secret to anyone that when we talk about elections, obviously there is another party in the United States, but it's this bi-party situation that we can see at the time of the elections itself. How do you consider the position in this case of the candidate of presidency from the Democratic Party in the face of this situation? What do you think about it? Nothing firm. Joe Biden is practically disappeared, and he doesn't support, he has nothing to do with that popular movement. Although he's not also the fascist such as Trump, but the people is not identified with him, and a high percentage of the population, just as we saw on 2016, they don't vote because they don't feel identified with any of the two of them. So therefore, above 100 million of voters called to participate in 2016, we can expect that same situation again. In other smaller parties, such as a Green Party, they don't expect him to win. So if we take into account that they are attacking Trump, it's more like some political moves. Many times they don't go to march, they don't participate, they don't take that social commitment. They just want to take advantage of the polls, but they have never been defenders of the black situation, of the black causes, which are the reason we are fighting for. If you go to CNN, you will see survey. If you go to Fox News, they are saying that Trump is going to win. But truth is that we don't know, because back in 2016, New York Times and the big news agencies, they swore that Hillary Clinton was going to win easily. And just look where we're standing right now. So if Trump loses, because there is the situation of this is not about popular vote, and this is the scent of anti-democratic, a country that speaks so much about being democratic and has no democracy at all. If Trump can lose both of the popular votes, And either way, he won't win. He can call his paramilitary and the state can divide in half. So truly, we don't know what it's going to be expected by November. Many African Americans people are getting concerned. So those images of the civil war are more becoming more and more real, and by the time. Thank you, Danny. James, based on what Danny has just explained, I ask you this because you are such a deeper knowledger of the American society. What could we expect from this point until November? What vision can you help us to have to think about when it comes to this election? Well, vision starts with the examination of the concrete situation in the moment. In lives have imposed a sense of alliances through countries. That also we can see a popular anti-Trump that includes not only African American among all the membership of young people and grown-up people. We also can see many traditional of the fighters from the civil rights and also members of their public party. And what we have in common is that we want to overthrow Trump in the White House, but beyond that, there are different objectives that are included inside this front anti-Trump. So there is a controversial situation, and also socialists here in the United States of voting or no by the name of Biden. According to a recent survey, registered that 31% of which supporters of Trump, they are not very excited. And this alliance against Trump is not an alliance for the policy and ideology of Joe Biden. And for our intention also, our priority is to. It doesn't mean that we are leaving behind the policy and the ideology that it's been manifested, especially within the members of the Senate. Therefore, we must prepare to fight against them. So, by November, I'm going to put an X on the box with the name of Biden, simply to overthrow Donald Trump. He's not going to get my vote, not because of any specific policy of Joe Biden, because he's against his policies of progressive perspectives, for instance. He doesn't support the universal taking care of health. He is supporting regime change in Venezuela. He is supporting a traditional activist of Democratic Party, non-allied to the progressive ones. So this is a situation very complex, very worsened, showing the diverse political sociology in many sectors of the United States. But this is an opportunity to move on for more progressive and also to indicate the main problem, that is the capitalist economy that reflects on racism and the lack of preparation to face the coronavirus, which is the priority. So beyond the crisis that we are facing right now, no, from this point and November 3rd, we must stay focused and we must come together, not only inside the United States, but also through sectors in a popular front against Trump, but also to invite citizens around the world to condemn this anti-democratic policy, these assassinations against African descendants, That is what we need to do. That is our vision facing the elections. Thank you. And in the midst of this assassination wave, it is attributed to journalist Charles Peirce. It's attributed to the term Pinochet. It says that a big city in the United States is like Pinochet. He used that verb. So wouldn't be right to say that the government of Donald Trump is nothing more than a dictatorship and that he is a dictator? Or are we overreacting? Well, to the dominant classes, they don't like using those images of Pinochet in the streets of Portland or at the national level. Just as we said with Barack Obama, imperialism and capitalism requires a smooth face, a face that promises. And with Trump or Bush Jr., we experienced a big crisis because the popularity of Bush and Trump worldwide. We know that Biden it's like a puppet. It's just a man that he can show that face, let's say, of democracy, but it's a Pinochet. So we can see right now only factions that maybe he would just show it in a dispute maybe a few months ago or a year ago. But it's getting together against Trump because Trump is risking, is putting capitalism in danger. Because as we say in a loose cannon, we cannot predict what is going to happen. We cannot predict, just as we read in the John book, what he's going to do with his foreign policy. So the true dominant class, Trump needs someone from outside, but he's going to remain being capitalism and represent their interest. They want something more reliable. So in front of these elections in November, the dominant classes, they're going to use all of their money, all of their power, all of their big press to support Biden. Not because Trump is a racist or other reasons that the movement of Black Lives Matter hates Trump, but because they are afraid of Trump and everything that he represents for fascism. So I think that the image of a Pinochet, of a Trujillo, of a tyrant, of many tyrants that the United States have put in the power and at a worldwide, we understand that those are countries. I believe that yes, Trump suits into that category. Thank you so much, and thank you for these impressions for Telesur. And I also thank James for your time for our critical move. Hugs for both of you. Let's take another break in our critical move. Remember, there's a strategic move in social media for you to participate. What is Donald Trump seeking with the deployment of federal agents, especially in democratic ruled cities, amidst protests against systemic racism and police brutality? Is it fighting violence his real goal? Give us your opinion. We'll be back very soon. Let's review what has characterized the socio-political panorama in the United States during the last few months. New tensions surrounding the Operation Legend are unleashed in the midst of the complex panorama that the Trump administration is going through. On the one hand, the COVID-19 pandemic that places the U.S. as the country with the highest number of infections, more than 4 million, and the highest number of fatalities, more than 149,000. Analysts agree that this health crisis has a clear impact on the U.S. economy, which has led 40 million citizens to apply for unemployment benefits. This situation is compounded by the social explosion that has occurred since last May in several states of the nation, which was triggered by the brutal arrest and subsequent murder of African-descended George Floyd at the hands of police officer Derek Chauvin, a situation that also rekindled the spark of the fight against racism on the planet. In this context, Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Law 1807, which gives him the power to deploy the army to control the demonstrations, and called for a firm hand from the governors. The threat was rejected by Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who distanced himself from the Republican leader. According to surveys published by the American media, with a view to the presidential election on November 3rd, 80% of voters consider that the current socio-political situation is out of control. We continue with the analysis. We have Roland Roebuck, community activist of the African-descended organization against police brutality. Roland, welcome to our critical move. I ask you, why does the Trump administration, instead of creating solutions, just create more problems? The answer is this. This president is driven by the polls, and the polls right now show Biden very, very high. And this is very worrying for this insecure president who now wants to adopt a policy of law and order to project across the nation that he is a person attached to civilian behavior. If it weren't for these polls, which show that the prisoner is in great disadvantages, he would not have sent these troops to set free speech in many of our communities in the United States. These troops are not prepared, nor trained to exercise that kind of responsibility, and at the same time, it has created chaos. But this chaos suits Trump because it justifies his firm hand. Let's go a little deeper into what you just told me. What are these troops really trained for? These troops are federal agents who work on the borders. Many of them work at the airports. So he has activated these troops, which I could not call invisible, but camouflaged, so as not to draw attention to where they are coming from. They have no insignia on their uniforms. They are vested under the authority of Trump. They put them in trucks without identifications, and it is not known where they are taking these arrested people. Their presence increases the level of anxiety and violence that is manifesting itself in these states where the majority of people are white. So the sense of the protest is being distorted, which are intended to reform the police, to stop the violence against innocent people. And now we are dealing with this front that is suffocating the cries of protest from many communities across the United States, which are led by Democratic mayors and governors. Where is this whole situation going to end up? This will come to an end on November 3rd, because the Biden administration is expected to understand this problem and use other efforts and strategies to calm the anxieties of our communities, which are demanding justice through the police systems in the United States. But, as I said before, we are not focused on police reform right now, trying to limit their funding and trying to divert that funding to mental health programs, social workers, etc. Because we have to admit that in this country it's not a democracy, because in a democracy you enjoy the level of free expression. I call this an Anglocracy. Anglocracy, where all laws, all institutions are aimed to advancing the interest of whites here in the United States and promoting white supremacy under the leadership of Trump, which has lost all character of morality, since he does not represent the principles of this aforementioned democracy. Thank you very much. Also, I thank you for the time you've dedicated to our critical move today. Thank you for your wise and judicious criteria. See you soon. Thank you. Let's go to conclusions.
Follow our latest updates concerning the novel coronavirus by checking our special content in our website.
U.S. history, we have highlighted the controversial executive orders of the current tenant of the White House, allegedly dictated, yes, as I say, dictated, a word that belongs to the same family of dictatorship and dictator, to combat violence and vandalism. In the midst of the growing wave of repudiation of police brutality, especially against the black population, President Trump throws a can of gasoline at the demonstrations, militarizing the streets of the cities, mainly those run by Democrats. And all this in the midst of the pandemic and in a pre-electoral context, so his executive decisions pursue a clear electoral goal. Will he get away with it? Will this be the springboard he needs to ratify himself for 4 more years at the head of the Oval Office? What consequences will these arbitrary measures have for the American population? Apparently, nothing good. For today, we close the geopolitical board.